Well, hey guys, sorry for the slight delay there, transitioning. It's with Christy. It's Sunday. Actually, can I start that again? It's the weekend. It's Christy, so it must be Weekend Winters. I haven't really come up with a intro for this. Also, you guys are gonna notice that I'm really tiny in the corner, and I'm gonna be really tiny in the corner for the whole show because, in all honesty, I'm really tired. I don't need these now. I've turned off music, so I know what it sounds like. Yeah, it's been kind of an intense couple days, and I thought, well, I could prepare a show or I could prepare myself to be on camera, and I decided the show was more important. I was actually this close to not even turning on the camera. That's how lazy I was feeling earlier this morning, but with the help of a little bit of caffeine and a hairbrush, I managed to pull myself together enough. Although I haven't lit the room properly and everything else, but you know what? You guys aren't here to look at me. We're here to talk about stuff, right? So hello, everyone. Good morning. Happy Sunday to you, wherever you are. I'm going to have a sip here. Sorry. Right. Well, in terms of how things are going for the show, I actually have a couple options. Well, I basically have two options for you guys. What I want to talk about today, we're going to start off, I thought, with a little bit of recreational social science, as we've done in the past. And then the only other thing I really have is, I've been in a Carl zone because I've been doing, like 3-hour shows. And yeah, we're going to watch a 1950s educational film. Yay! We're going to do an analysis of it using discourse analysis. And as a consequence, I don't have a lot of, I had a lot of space for other things to prepare for the show. So really quickly, I was invited to speak at this journalism institute where they also work on elections and political communications. They do focus group research, sometimes in conjunction with the French election study, and they are interested in my study in Britain. So I went over there and I talked all about my study and as to how we do it and what we do with the data and some of our findings. And all that was really great, but it just means that I sort of have either Carl or social science on the brain. So to get out of Carl for a bit, we don't want to start the morning with Carl, for God's sake. We have instead something that I used to do in my course, which is to try to, for people who haven't seen or who haven't had the idea of a social construction of reality before, this was something that I used to try to demonstrate how media and communications, how language can be used to create a sense of what reality ought to be normatively, with sort of is ought or ought questions. I thought we would do that. Then the other thing we have is, and I don't know if you guys really want to watch or talk about this at all, but it is it's Carl related, and sorry about that. You guys can decide we don't want to do any more Carl. That's fine. But I thought it might be interesting to really go through, this was the legal guidance on cases involving violations of Section 127 of the Communications Law, that I think the malicious communications part of it. And I think that this is what Carl would be tried under. So there's you guys might on social media be aware of the fact that there are a lot of people who are saying, oh, how can you define grossly offensive and it's so subjective. There's no objective standard for what offensive is. You're just going to turn everything into being offensive. I found it particularly useful to be able to challenge people who just make that, and it's an uninformed claim. They've made no effort to actually educate themselves on the law or the standards or the guidelines or the protections for offensive speech. And if you guys want to, we can go through that as well. That's kind of like the second half of the show. The other thing I should say up front is, I think this is only going to be an hour long. Yeah, it's the video that opened up Manos Hands of Fate. That's the first time I saw this. I was watching MST3. Sorry, I'm back on the Date with Your Family. Yeah, the Date with Your Family video, the first time I saw that was on a Mystery Science Theater 3000 episode. And I remembered it years later as a really good example of the social construction of reality, how they were using basically, educational / propaganda films to impute or to suggest or construct what people ought to be like at this time period. And there's a lot of other things that go into the construction of what is normal and what is right and proper that we can analyze. So yeah, that's going to be fun. That was really it. So if we only do the one video because you guys are tired of Carl, then I literally have nothing else. I think I'm going to go for about an hour today, unless we have some chat in the chat. But I'm really not that prepared. You guys are lucky I put on eye makeup today. You're lucky I turned the camera on. Right. So let's kick off, shall we? I guess I will. Okay. Let me think about how to do this. I will do a date with your family first, regardless, because it's the only content I've prepared for the show. And then what I'll do afterwards, we can talk about it in the chat. And if people want me to continue on with the prosecution guidelines, and we can go through these. Obviously, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a barrister. I have no legal expert opinion in British law. But what I can do is I can read English, and I also know Carl's case from experience quite deeply. So I think I can make, like an informed link between the guidelines and his behaviors. So, all right. Someone's never tired of Carl's self-destruction. Yeah, it's kind of my kink right now. Watching it go down in flames. Oh, it does make life a little bit easier. Oh, and one thing too, I've got my old King of Limbs, in case you're wondering, King of Limbs Radiohead t-shirt that I'm wearing. That's from when I saw them live in concert. That was amazing. Radiohead, they're awesome. All right, let's turn our minds now. We're only, about 10 minutes? Oh, not even 10 minutes of babbling into the show. Thinking about the timestamps later on. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about... Oh, no, too soon. We are going to, like I said, do recreational social science. And when I say this flippantly, it might be worth me describing what not recreational social science would entail. If we were truly interested in analyzing this discourse or this content for as a piece of evidence for ideas of what certain people in society were trying to present to children in the 1950s. We would take the entire script and the transcript of it. We would also and analyze the text of it. And we'll see some of it. We're going to talk again about the most important ones from Guy's discourse analysis, or Guy's tools for how to use language. In other words, significance, non-significance. What does the writer, or the speaker in this case, link together as being significant? How do they indicate what things are important or are unimportant? Also, the creation of identity and other people's, notions of identity. Also, politics and what is the social good, what is the public good. I think those are the ones that are really useful for us to analyze in this situation. But if we were doing it professionally, we would expand it out and really look at all the various dimensions that Guy mentioned. We might also do other forms of language analysis on the text. But so we would very thoroughly examine what words the speakers chose to use to communicate their ideas, and then also map them onto the images being presented at the time that the text is being constructed, to show a sort of visual representation of the norms and attitudes that this is trying to convey are appropriate or desirable. So if we were to do it properly, we would have all the data. We wouldn't just sit and watch a video like this. You can't get peer-reviewed publications from one time through. But this is at least, I think, entertaining, like I said, recreationally, to look at how people in the past have tried to put forward a notion of what a proper family looks like, or what a possible family could look like. And I think by looking at how these images and norms and attitudes are presented from the last century, it might make us a bit more aware of the kinds of presentations of norms and what's appropriate and what family means in the 21st century. All right, before we start, I've turned the chat off, but let me just check you guys, see if there's anything else here you have that's interesting to say. Weird fun fact, a date with your family has a Wikipedia page. It's probably became famous because of MST3K. Did we see the Ben Shapiro interview? Yeah, 250. If you go to Kevin's channel and you watch the happy hour, it would be really good if someone could timestamp that 3-hour show, because that was ridiculously long. But there we do cover the Ben Shapiro interview with Andrew Neil. The one thing we missed was him actually sort of storming off at the end because it was getting to be long. These educational films were an industry unto themselves. Oh yeah, and they definitely come from a certain perspective. as we'll see. All right, let me pop in my headphones. Can you guys hear the bells in the background? No, looks like I've got my noise suppression filter high enough where you probably can't hear the church bells in the background, so that's good. They just sound like church bells. The Lockheed produced ones about drugs are amazing. Well, maybe we can look those up, and if people like this, we can do it again. It's pretty easy for me. And also, here's the other thing about why I thought to do A Date with Your Family as a reaction video with a social science framework. I can't deal with PragerU this morning, you guys. I've only had like 2 cups of coffee, and it's Sunday, and I was just, I wasn't, energy-wise, I wasn't in a place. So let's hit play and listen to what this 1950s educational film production was trying to convey about the proper and ideal American family. Turn it up a little bit here for you.
This boy and girl coming home from school look quite content with life. And why not?
Sorry guys, that seems quite quiet. I don't know if I can really turn it up on my desktop anymore, or if it's just automated, but I will make an effort to try to increase the volume because it looks a little on the soft side from my readings. So let's see if that's a bit better.
They're looking forward to an important date, dinner at home with the family. What's the matter? Doesn't that sound exciting to you?
All right, so let's, from even the first 32 seconds, let's see what we've got in here, right, in terms of what's being presented. We have a very middle class family. It's not affluent. You can see it looks, I think, probably what would be considered a middle class. And the American dream is very much tied to middle classness, even though people aspire to be rich. The actual sort of American dream is featured as this sort of version of middle class. But middle class can be anything from, let's say, in a more economically stratified structure, upper lower class to lower upper class. So if you think about there being lower class, middle class, and upper class lower in terms of income earnings, lower income earnings, middle income earnings, and high income earnings. And then within each of those subcategories, there's the lower class people at the bottom of the economic lower wage scale, and then the middle class, the middle lower class and the upper lower class. Then in the middle, there's the lower middle class, the middle class, the upper middle class. So we can divide those 3 categories into a further subcategory. And I think unusually in America, my perception is, people can differ you if you want, is that everything from upper lower class, basically the people who are just above making it, to the people who are lower upper class, and all of what we call middle economic class are considered middle class in America, whereas class divisions in Europe, based on the kinds of labor you do rather than in the income you earn. The working class are sort of blue-collar workers traditionally, and so it's much more tied to a sense of the kinds of jobs you perform, although class identification is weakening significantly, at least in Britain. This is a presentation that I think this company was trying to pitch at quite a lot of students. So we've got a boy and a girl here. We're gonna, and they're white, of course, because it is the 1950s, and normativity was linked to whiteness. So,
dinner at home with the family. What's the matter? Doesn't that sound exciting to you?
All right, you guys, why don't I do this? I'm really worried that the sound is a bit soft for you, and I can't see your yadiyas yet, but it is worrying me enough. So I'm going to increase the output gains on my desktop audio while on the fly here, because there's a compressor on it, so that might also be part of the problem. I think the compressor was just to even out the kinds of sound, but I'm going to bump up the gains here, and we're going to see if that makes a big difference. Also, it might make a big difference. I'll back off of this. There we go.
Well, to them, it's a special occasion.
That to me seems like it would be better for you guys. It's more in the yellow rather than just barely touching it. Now, maybe you're not noticing that I'm oversensitive on my audio. I know I'm obsessed with it to the point of, being annoying, but I want you guys to have an equal audio experience, because I know from the happy hour last night, Kevin tends to move around sometimes, so he'll start his mic in one position and then he'll talk in a different position, and the audio on his stuff shifts and you have to turn it up and down. And yeah, we need to get him to just sit in front of his mic and not move. Incremental steps with Kevin. Incremental. First we get him to like put in his headphones, then he gets a better mic, then he gets a proper connection for his laptop so he's not delayed and dropping out all the time, which seems to have improved. So we'll have to ask him if the lead came through the cord in America. And then finally, we just need him to be at a consistent point throughout the entire show so that he's not adjusting the audio levels for people in terms of their perception of the sound. So anyway, that was unnecessary, and I've just clipped myself, so I'll back off my own audio here. All right. Right, so what does the author say? I think what he says is, we'll go back. I got totally distracted by what I perceive to be poor quality of the audio. Right.
Family. What's the matter? Doesn't that sound exciting to you? Well, to them, it's a special occasion.
It's interesting that the narrator here takes on almost immediately a shitty attitude. He's like, he knows he's talking to teenagers. And he's like, what, you don't think that sounds like a lot of fun, having dinner with your family? Well, to these two kids that are completely fictional, it's awesome. And I just thought that was kind of an interesting approach when trying to convey to people, like, some sort of notion of, how life should be. Is they immediately, sorry, I'm going to turn that a little bit, they immediately get super, super aggressive. I guess it would be nice if I could bring the chat up, because you guys might have comments on here too that are fun. So I think I can resize the window in such a way that allows me to have both this window and your window up on there. All right. Only one earphone is working, so you can't tell. All right. Sounds fine. Sounds okay. Okay. Very good. Dinner with your family sounds like a nightmare and you're in your 30s. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, sometimes the holidays are stressful enough, let alone thinking about dinner every night. But it gets better. So we're seeing already that in terms of normativity, norms, what's politics, what's being shown to be important, here the idea of being at home in the evening to be with your family fully is an important thing to do.
As it has been ever since they sat down to dinner in high chairs. Why should they feel that way about something you take so completely for granted?
Ooh, again, what the shade? Wait, this narrator is like all about assuming the teenagers are going to have like a crappy attitude. And I mean, fair enough, teenagers have been known to have crappy attitudes. But it just, again, comes across as a bit patronizing or a bit, aggressive for a video that is going to be watched by strangers, in my opinion. He was giving as Mike Balla said, the narrator is actually giving the finger while he's reading his entire script. All right, so let's see what happens with the boy and the girl here. What's the future story as we go along?
Let's see if we can find out. First of all, daughter has changed from school clothes to something more festive.
All right, so one of the things that's interesting is we kind of missed it in the first part, but the characters are known by their role in the family. So this is daughter. And what is daughter's ideal role? How does she act normally in a home environment according to what is idealized by the authors of the script? And that is that she comes home from school and she changes her clothes into something more festive. And also, as we'll see, her role in the family as daughter is related to domestic care of the men in the family.
Dressing a little makes her feel, and consequently look, more charming.
By putting on something festive, she looks and therefore feels more charming, because as a daughter, she's judged by her appearance. Do you see how messed up this is? Like, this is supposed to be normal life. Girls are supposed to go home and change into something to be visually pleasing for members of their family. What the hell were we teaching kids in the 1950s? Seriously. That's messed up.
Even the table takes on a special air. Mother, too, changes from her daytime clothes. The women of this family seem to feel that they owe it to the men of the family to look relaxed, rested, and attractive at dinner time.
Women don't get to be people with their own emotions and frustrations. Their job is to be visually pleasing to the men in the family and create an air of calm while slowly suppressing all their emotions and wanting to die. Yeah, it's, the idea that a woman who is staying at home has to change because her husband is coming home. Like, he can't see her in the clothes that she was wearing around the house the rest of the day. She has to dress up for him when he arrives. Are you kidding? This is, yeah. So much sexism. And if you want to call it, I think, latent misogyny, it's this idea that, women have these very specific roles that are to do with maintaining and preserving and protecting and nurturing male power. And certainly we see what this movie has as the roles of women is to, look pretty and to think about the men in the family, not to think about themselves as human beings. Their role is to self-negate. Yeah, as K said in the chat, it's Harry Enfield style. Women, know your place. If you've seen that Harry Enfield sketch, mocking the idea that, women should know their place.
Brother is spending an hour before dinner catching up on his homework.
Now, brother gets to go upstairs and focus on his education, while the women prepare the table and themselves visually and the food that keeps him going. But his focus is not on providing for the domestic tranquility or the comfort of others. He's not worried about how he looks necessarily for the women, although we'll see that everyone gets a little bit dressed up for dinner. But his focus is on his education. Why? Because men, need careers and women need domestic skills, according to the normative structure of the 1950s.
He has plans this evening. Perhaps that explains the telephone call. But he won't spend a lot of time on the phone either. When there are several members of the family to be considered, it is not a good idea for one member to monopolize the phone.
All right, so I guess this is their learning experience to say, don't spend the whole night talking on the phone with your friends. Because I guess in the 1950s that was already a problem. They're trying to cut it off at the pass. But, he is the one making the phone call. He is the one being social, initiating contact. He has an external life. He has a public life where women have private lives in the home. And the home life, the private life of women is, of course, focused on the happiness of men. So, can we talk a little bit? So we talk about identity here. You can kind of see this role of not only a brother, but the masculine roles and the feminine roles are being very clearly laid out here, not only in the text, but in what they're visually represented as doing. We have norms about what's good and what's bad and what's significant in terms of, family and what's not. So this is an example of how we can use discourse analysis as a tool to separate out different elements of communications to more systematically track them over time. So, right.
And it is never good to allow telephone conversations to interfere with studies.
I mean, seriously, come on. You gotta let teenagers be teenagers a bit and have a bit of fun. That's, don't let the phone, don't let your human interactions interfere with your studies. I mean, again, that's pretty aspirational. Too fitty. How the hell is he carrying that phone around? Yeah, well, they had pretty long cords / leads, depending on where you live on. Back in the day, apparently. They had, they go like your DSL cables now, all over. Get off the phone, boy! Yes, brother. Yeah.
Is it that late? Dad'll be here any minute. Better tell Mother she's needed in the kitchen.
All right, because again, women are really at the beck and call of guys. Also, just note that, like brother, daughter, mother, they are empty vessels. They aren't real people here in this video. Their titles are meant to be, their bodies are meant to be sort of placeholders for the students to impute themselves. So the girls in the classrooms were meant to identify with daughter and go, oh yes, I should help mother, tell her when dad is coming home so we can get the house ready. Because, what we've been doing all day, we also, our work extends into the evening. Dad kind of clocks in, does a day of work, he comes home and he gets pampered. But women's work goes 24 hours a day.
Brother notices the time and realizes that he must put things in order and clean himself up in time for dinner.
All he has to do to get ready for dinner is wash his face. He didn't have to cook or anything like that. Oh yeah, that's woman stuff. Leave them downstairs. I'm going to focus on my social life and my studies and myself.
Hello there. Junior is always in a hurry, particularly for dinner. But first there's a cleanup job to do on this young man. Brother takes it upon himself to help share Junior's responsibility for keeping their room in good order.
So again, while women are responsible for the whole house, he's responsible for his room and his little brother, but only because it's like their space. So I think there's a little bit, I mean, it's kind of nice here, at least that they're doing a bit of division of labor, but I think the point is more about like cleanliness at the table rather than actually getting men to participate in housework. That's my thought anyway on this.
And keeping Junior in good order, too. Punctuality is stressed in this household. By that I mean hair is combed and faces and hands scrubbed before the boys come to the table so they won't delay the meal. Now, mother and daughter put the finishing touches on the dinner.
This is what you're meant to do, ladies. You're meant to put the finishing touches on the dinner while the men just wash their face and show up. I mean, she had the same day at school that her brother had, and yet her day doesn't end. She doesn't get to focus on her studies when she gets home. She's got to focus on making sure the men in the family are taken care of before she can work on her own educational... Actually, she doesn't, in this video, have just do any homework. But there's no time in this video for her to do it. So, yeah, Madeline Swan, we were noticing the thing about the division of labor here, the normative ideas of the division of labor the movie is trying to communicate to the students who are watching it. I would assume she has the same homework too. Yep, Stephanie.
Father, too, looks forward to this date with the family. He has had a hard day at the office, and in his briefcase are some contracts which must be looked over tonight. But in the meantime, he will relax at dinner with those he loves.
He's going to show up to a hot meal and then maybe do a little bit of work afterwards. You know, not spend time with his wife because he's got his work to do. He's going to show up, get fed, do a bit more work, get sexually satisfied, and then go to sleep. It must have been so nice to be like a middle-class white guy in the 1950s. Honestly. You know, nobody else. You didn't want to be a black man or a black woman. And white women obviously had it way better than black people or Hispanic people or anything else. But compared to white men, they didn't have as much freedom. But certainly, you know, imagine, I would love that. If I came home and I could just like drop my stuff, walk to a clean house, to you know, someone you know, I could cover the same rent with one person and with my salary, whatever, and just have everything ready for me and all my needs taken care of. Boy, that would be awesome. But, you know, right now that would be called a butler, not a wife or husband.
A simple centerpiece made from some flowers which grow in the backyard is another of daughter's contributions to the dinner. But it takes up a little too much room, so she moves it to the sideboard.
So she made something really pretty, but she doesn't want to bring attention to herself, so she marginalizes her own contribution to the family meal by putting it at a different table. I mean, I don't quite understand. Like, her focus, all her energy, daughters, is going on other people in the family. This is so messed up.
These boys greet their dad as though they are genuinely glad to see him.
Whether or not they actually are. But this is male bonding time. While the women are in the kitchen, the men get together and talk about how their days went, and, you know, we'll just wait for the service ding, ding, ding butler to bring out their meal. But let's bond as males here.
As though they had really missed being away from him during the day and are anxious to talk to him.
They're just faking it.
This is the time for pleasant discussion in a thoroughly relaxed mood.
Also, everything really is, at the end of the day, focused around the father. Right, so we talk about the roles of the children in the home, right? But ultimately, like, having the daughter being pleasing for the men by changing her clothes after school to just something more festive. Mother being all focused on dad's needs and having everything ready the moment he walks in the door. The boys come down and they greet their father, and they're talking to him about pleasant things and, paying attention and interacting. It's all patriarchal. It's so patriarchal. And it's all about preserving the male power, and then under him, the mother, because that's the family unit. And then the next most high status are the boys. And then, of course, at the bottom, there's the daughter.
They don't pick this time of the day to spring unpleasant surprises on Dad. If they have disagreeable news, they'll postpone the discussion until another time.
Daddy needs to be protected from what's going on in his children's life, because he had a hard day at work, y'all. No wonder men are snowflakes. We've enculturated men to be snowflakes, to feel entitled to this idea that, if they go in and they work in the office, not at all like taking any regard of the hard physical labor of keeping up the house and the groceries and the food preparation and the garden and everything else that their wives are doing, everything revolves around them. Everything revolves around creating a space where they can feel comfortable. It's about worshiping the penis. How do you institutionalize that worship in every aspect of your family life? Yeah, this is Peterson's new video. He's going to dust this off and remake it. Good point, Mike. Or no, that was HK.
And this is no time to dun father for a raise in your allowance, new clothes, or argue about other financial matters.
Don't ask Dad for money. It's just kind of weird how much Dad needs protection from the lives of his children, according to this video. It's really weird.
Dinner time.
Oh, women.
Yes, Mother.
Dinner.
Junior remembered to clean up.
I see a woman. It must be time to eat, because the only function in this house that women have are to look pretty and serve us food. This is so ridiculous.
Brother seats Junior.
Well, he's seating Junior because, of course, he's a subordinate to the patriarchy of the family. The patriarch, I should say. The patriarch of the family. And daughter's too busy, trying to get, draw attention to the flower thing she made that nobody noticed because it didn't fit on the table.
Then helps Mother to her chair as he would his best girl.
That is just weird. I'm sorry. I'm going to say that. To treat your mother like you would your girlfriend and show her the same respect you would a woman you're dating, that is just creepy. I don't know why they thought that would be a good idea. Treat your mother like you treat your best girl. Ew. Ugh. Also, and of course it reinforces, too, this idea that even though she has been responsible for putting the food on the table, that somehow he's still sort of being chivalrous and helping her. She's incapable of pulling her chair in on her own. She's so weak and frail as a woman, although all the stuff on the table is what she's made. Also, it's infantilizing. Exactly. So again, we see these norms, we see how it's made significant. Men's roles are made significant as sort of being, dominant, and their needs are being taken care of. Women do all the work, but then are also treated like they're on a pedestal, or, too fragile to pull out their own chair. See, Dad doesn't give a crap about daughter. He's like, bleh. Son needs to honor his mother. Dad's like, bleh. That's close enough. Just sit down.
Well, the dinner date has begun, and they're all happy about it.
They're all happy about it. Sounds like they're trying to convince the audience with text rather than with the actual presentation. But here we go. The father, again, patriarch of the family, he gets to be at the head of the table. The mother, of course, is his consort, and the children are all in their place. And we can see the boys, but the girl is, her back is to us. So I guess they had to do that with somebody, but.
Many families throughout the country observe the custom of saying grace at.
And this is interesting. Saying grace, I don't know if in a Jewish community you would say saying grace or you'd say something else, but clearly this assumes a Christian background. I think the saying of grace as opposed to a prayer, I'd have to check on that, but it seems to me that this is certainly a Christian normative approach of how people should act at dinner time.
Meal time. it is always treated with reverence and respect.
But also this was, put out in the public schools. I assume they're educational videos. So in these videos, they're communicating to students that it's appropriate to pray before your meal. Now, obviously, one could say that that's not a violation of the separation clause, but it's not describing what people do. This is normative. It's telling you that you sort of like, you ought to pray. And it did phrase it as many families do this, but it's not something I tend to focus on too much. Like with my analysis, I'm more interested in the gendered roles when I had done this in classrooms in the past, and who plays what role in the family, and these sort of vacuous brother, father, mother roles that they put up that we're meant to project ourselves into and identify with our role in this, our place, and what we're meant to be doing.
Napkins on the lap, the family awaits service. They converse pleasantly while Dad serves.
Now, Dad didn't do anything for this meal. I mean, yes, okay, you want to say he paid for it because in the 1950s, women were expected to, stay at home and not have independent economic sources. But we've just seen them. They all sat down. They said grace, and then Dad serves. Who did they not thank? Did they thank Mom for this meal? Did they thank Daughter for her work helping Mom and setting up the table and making everything look pretty? Do they get acknowledged every night for the contributions they make to creating a date with your family? No. Women's work is invisible. It's assumed. It's just meant to be there, and they don't get credit for it. Instead, an invisible person in the sky gets thanked for the work, for preparing the food and putting it on the table. Maybe he'll do the washing up. Actually, I think there might be some more washing up gendered division of labor coming up. We'll have to. I don't remember though.
Pleasant, unemotional conversation helps digestion.
Pleasant, unemotional conversation helps digestion. Repress. So much of this is about repression, right? Daughter is meant to come in, whatever her day at school, and put on something festive for the family members. Mother is meant to, show up looking nice for her husband. Dad, when he gets home from work, the kids aren't meant to ask him for anything or be crappy or ask for a raise. And then a dinner emotionless conversation is supposed. Basically, again, this is all about creating a little, zone of protecting Dad from anything bad happening in the house. Everyone's meant to, emotionally suppress themselves so that, Dad can have a nice meal.
Father serves Mother first, then Daughter, then the boys. Don't worry, fellas, you won't get left.
Yeah, don't worry, you're gonna get fed. Just, the people who made the food and helped put it on the table. Because they're women, you gotta treat them chivalrously. That's how we rationalize our patriarchy.
Junior? Of course. By example, older children can teach younger ones good table manners.
There we go. So a little bit of role modeling there.
No one starts eating until Father has served himself.
Right, because again, everything is about the patriarch. Yeah, he's like the second to God in this, right? God provided the stuff in their worldview, right, when they pray to him. And then the next biggest provider is the man. And the father who, goes out, fair enough, he brings home his contribution. But he's not the only person making a contribution to the meal. He's providing the financial stuff, and everything else then magically turns into food prepared on his table for him. But again, it's just reinforcing the patriarchy, how all of this is meant to be about the father.
Always wait for the hostess, in this case Mother, to begin eating before you start. Let Father and Mother guide the conversational trend if they desire. After all, they made all this possible and may want to talk over their day with each other.
Shut up, kids. This is our time. You can have your time after the table. Why? What is the point of getting everyone sitting together and just be like, okay, kids, we're going to ignore you and we're going to have our own conversation now. You just sit in silence. That's real family bonding. If you notice how much emotional repression there is in this video, and power structure and deference and pleasing higher authorities. So yeah, James, I think you were supposed to both wait until Dad serves his self but then look over to mother to see when she starts to eat. It's all very complicated, these rules. It's like eating with the queen.
Tell mother how good the food is. Maybe sis rates a compliment, too.
Maybe. She did, yeah. Hey, good meal. That's what you get. Like after everything. Oh, this is nice. So, honey, let me talk about myself for the next 20 minutes. Oh, yeah, and daughter made a contribution? Maybe tell her. Hey, good work in the kitchen, little lady.
It makes them want to continue pleasing you.
If you tell women nice things, they'll keep, like being your servant. Not because they worked hard, like Dad did, and not because, they deserve some acknowledgement for the efforts that they make to the meal. It's for the men. If you give them compliments, then maybe they'll just keep doing it. Like, if you tell a woman nice things, she'll have sex with you. If you tell a woman nice things, she'll keep making you dinner. Oh, yes. Can you just see can you see the patriarchal norms that just seep through every aspect of this video? And by the way, I didn't go through it like this in my classrooms. Obviously, we had an hour, so we had to watch it as a whole thing. And then I asked my students, what did you see in this? What did you notice? And then from each other's responses, they would build off of each other. Like one person would notice the roles, and then someone else would build on that. So this is not how I did it, by the way, in my classroom. I didn't just sort of stop it and point and laugh every couple of minutes. I don't have enough time for that. We'd watch the whole thing through, and people would make notes, and then we'd have a discussion afterwards. So I feel a little bit freer now to say the things that I really feel.
Well, all this is good general advice, but there are some specific don'ts. Maybe the family will demonstrate for us. Don't monopolize the conversation and...
Of course, with their sexism, when it comes to talking too much, even though it's really been the men who've done most of the talking so far as presented. When Dad came home and talked to the boys, and brother was talking on the phone, and brother was talking to brother, that was all fine. But when it comes to representing someone who talks too much, they pick the daughter. I'm just saying. Why it gotta be a woman? Why is it gotta be the woman?
Go on and on without stopping. Nothing destroys the charm of a meal more quickly.
Nothing destroys the charm of a meal more quickly than a woman who doesn't know her place and doesn't know when to shut up, right? That's, 1950s.
To say that the rest of the group is bored would be a gross understatement.
Oh, God, this woman with her, her pointless emotional concerns, or her wanting to discuss her day. Women stuff. Everyone's disgusted by the daughter talking about her life.
Don't discuss unpleasant topics such as gruesome sights or sounds.
Again, very gendered, assuming that it's going to be the boys. Who, shut up about your damn flowers, daughter, just because you spent an hour and a half on that damn table decoration that was sat behind us and no one's even noticed yet. Yes. But of course, we're associating men with violence and aggression and gross images that are inappropriate. Because again, gendered.
Or unpleasant occurrences. This is a time of pleasure, of charm and relaxation, remember?
Yes, protect your dad from stuff. Remember, he's the person that everything is centered around. It's all about his meal and his experience at the meal, y'all. Oh, Dad looks grossed out.
Don't make unkind comparisons about your stand of living. The dinner table is no place for discontent.
Right, so this is interesting too. This is a theme I find a lot in patriarchal texts we don't really talk too much about. But when patriarchal texts talk about other people's roles, there seems to be a real sensitivity to men's economic constraints. So for instance, women aren't supposed to want, when women of course couldn't work, they were dependent on their husbands or their family or whatever for all of their provisions, under the law until women became legal entities in their own rights. You weren't supposed to ask for expensive clothes or expensive things. And it's still the same thing here. Like, the children aren't supposed to want nicer material objects or to compare themselves to other families. Why? Because it makes dad feel bad. If he's not enough of a provider, or, like he has a job, rather than the kids talking about it and explaining that, we don't have as much money as other families because we have this thing or whatever, and we have to make do. Can we, but you can get hand-me-downs, whatever. You're just meant to suppress it. Just don't talk about it. There's so much emotional repression that is taught in this. It's about, don't say these things, don't be like this. Make everything a fake, pleasant experience for your dad. Make it look like everything is fine on the surface while you're dying inside.
It makes Dad and Mother uncomfortable and unhappy.
Suppress your feelings. Boy, that's boring. Come on, guys. Move the text along.
Don't insult your brother or sister with offensive remarks about friends. Arguments, harsh words mean tension and distress for
Exactly,
everyone.
James. Pleasant and unemotional. Everyone be emotionally dead inside at dinner. Just fake your way through it. Pretend you like your family. It's all a fiction. It doesn't matter your emotional life in the 1950s.
Do remember simply this. Treat the other members of your family with the same respect and cordiality you would show your most treasured friend outside the family circle. This does not mean you should be stiff or formal. With your own family, you can relax. Be yourself.
Be
Just
perfect
be sure
all the
it's
time.
your best self.
Always be your best self, not the person you really are.
Now,
seriously, it's crazy, the emotional repression. Freud would have had a field day with this.
Things are on an even keel again.
Oh, look, we're living a lie,
Now
everyone.
we're ready for dessert. Most families don't have maids, so
most families don't have maids, so we just treat Mother like a maid.
needs help with the serving from the kitchen.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Son says Mother has done enough. Watch him play butler.
Oh, wait, but the daughter got up too. What about her? What the hell is going on? He's gonna help out, but the daughter gets up to help, gets no acknowledgement whatsoever.
The removal of dishes from the main course and...
Wait. He plays butler? So what is the daughter doing? She's the one who's actually getting the cake ready. All he did was take a plate over into the kitchen.
The serving of dessert set the stage for the conclusion of a thoroughly pleasant meal.
It's not son playing butler, it's daughter. She goes and gets the food. What is he talking about? Once again, it's women providing the service for the men. In this case, the men even getting credit for it. The daughter was ignored.
Do you begin to see now how a date with your family can be a truly special occasion?
It can be an emotional nightmare, according to this video. It's repressive, patriarchal, emotionally dead, repressing all our true emotions, and meant to reinforce a power structure in the home that's built around protecting the patriarch at the expense of everybody else. I hope the daughter mentions the hue of her new boyfriend. Oh, yes. I'll wait till we get to the end of the video, because we're at 9:17 and it's 10 minutes in length, so...
Do you know why brother and sister looked forward to the evening?
What is this bullshit about the brother being the butler? Who went to the... Okay, he took some damn plates. And then she went to the kitchen, cut up the cake, brought it back, is serving it, and gets no acknowledgement whatsoever. Most households don't have a maid. They have a daughter.
When the dinner hour at home is treated with a certain amount of graciousness and ceremony, it can be memorable. There is no family so poor but that the evening meal can be eaten in an atmosphere of warmth.
There's no family so poor that they can't fake and emotionally repress themselves into having an artificial interaction as a family that's based off of this middle-class norm.
And gentleness. There is no family so busy but that it can come together in the evening for a dinner date which will give its members something to look back upon with happiness.
What? It's all fake. God. I remember all the emotional repression at my meal time. It always gave me indigestion because I never felt comfortable bringing up my actual feelings with my family. It's all about creating an artificial sense of domestic bliss that we all aspire to, but we are all chained to and feel like we never live up to, thereby always leaving feeling dissatisfied with what our lives are.
All their days.
Oh yeah, brother doesn't do any dishes. No, nobody helps. I assume that's just the women of the family. So as we saw through that, by looking at what they made significant, obviously if we look at it in totality, what is significant is a father's experience of his family and his home. everything is centered around the experience of the father and honoring his role as the patriarch. And then there's a kind of a split, as there always is, between the parental dominance, so like the woman, the wife, who I didn't see have any dialogue. Did anyone actually see, now that, this is actually the first time I've noticed it, I don't think mother gets a chance to speak, other than when mom and dad are supposed to be having some pleasant conversation about their own day. But really, other than, you know, her talking to her husband or whatever else, she never really spoke. She never had any kind of role in this whatsoever. And where was I going with this? I can't remember now. But, because I all distracted with the realization that oh, yikes, that was way too loud. Sorry, everyone. We'll just turn that off now. Yeah, I'll leave this up. We can talk about whether or not we're going to do the Sargon thing. I think there is some interest in doing the Sargon thing afterwards. But that to me was, there's a couple of things I wanted to mention about that video, though, that my students, for instance, noticed. One, obviously, everyone is white. Not that there's anything wrong with having a white family, but they could, today you would have far more inclusive representations. Not only in terms of whiteness, you know, and what it means to be normal and middle class, which here is very much associated with whiteness, but also different kinds of families. It was pointed out by a very astute student that, you know, this was made in the 1950s, after the Second World War, and a lot of families might have had a brother or a father who died, and there is no kind of place for a widowed family in this. Like, what do you do when the man isn't there to be the center of what everyone gets ready for and why the meal is prepared and who serves it? So it's quite limited in terms of what is being presented as normal. So you've got sort of, you know, the white ethnicity dimension of normality. You have the class dimension of normality. You know, this family has got quite a lot of money. Clearly, they can afford dessert. So there's no option or role model for kids who don't have, you know, that much nice stuff. And clearly it is so highly gendered. It is so highly gendered. Right, I'm going to look a little bit. What I think I'll do is, yes, what is it, Sisal? Is that how you say your name? Pleasant dinner equals quiet woman. Power structure, power structure, power structure. Yep, absolutely. Also, did no one work in the evenings? Exactly. This has no real place for shift work, a more blue-collar type of work. It's very much aspirational, dad having a white-collar job, and he's got contracts to look over in the evening. So presumably, like, he comes home, he has his meal served to him, he has little interactions, fake interactions with his family, and then he goes into his office and ignores his wife for the rest of the night. Anyway. Right. How wrong is it if I saw my stepfather in that video? Well, was your stepfather raised in the 1950s? He might have watched this and been influenced by it. But I think we can look back now and see how value-laden these videos were. What's wrong with women preparing food? There's nothing wrong with it, but it is the only role they have in the video. Women are always associated with serving men. And other than men serving the food that women have prepared, they don't have a role in the preparation of the food. They don't have a role in the creating of the comfort domestic situation. You know, brother was studying after school and younger brother was playing after school, whereas daughter was preparing stuff for the family. So, yep, that's it. Hey guys, you know, I managed to babble on for an hour anyway. So how about this? How about we take a few minute break? Because I'm going to do a 2-hour show, I guess, today. This took longer than I planned. And I will get coffee. You guys can hear the new mix of longer songs, because rather than having the same song repeat, I've put together a mash of all of Yellow Cab, and it starts at the beginning now, and it will run through all 4 songs that they have Creative Commons license that I liked. And we'll come back at the top of the hour, so that'll be about less than 7 minutes from now. And then we will look at the guidance on cases involving communications sent via social media, so that you guys feel very well prepared to talk to people on Twitter or other forms of social media about what I think is going to be the communications law that Carl would be charged with by West Midlands police if he was going to be charged with a crime. This is the same one that Dankula was charged under. And let's take a look at what the guidelines are so that we understand exactly what kind of case they would be bringing up against him. So until then, you guys can watch animal videos and listen to some music. And I will be back at the top of the hour. So see you guys soon. Go put on some boiling water or make a cup of tea or whatever you need to do. Take a bathroom break. I'll see you back here at the top of the hour. Bye-bye.
Directions ahead, it's only been long as I feel so lonely. I decide to rain, the grains on my head is sad to fade away. I hear you quite slowly, distracts my head. It's a girl in the middle of the nothingness. You tell me why to alter the truth, and I stand to explain it with you. The blood in front of my eyes, so that's why I remember I'm alive. And it really meant sunshine, my look. And I really meant the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. And I really meant the sunshine, my love. And I really meant the sunshine, baby. Thousands of people and friends, regardless directions ahead. It's only been long as I feel so lonely. I start to rain, the grains on my head is sad to fade away. I hear you quite slowly, distracts my head. It's a girl in the middle of the nothingness. And you tell me why, so I'll tell me true. And I spend 3 days explaining to you. And you disappear in front of my eyes, so that's why I remember I'm alive. And I really miss the sunshine, my lord. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. And I really miss the sunshine, my lord. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. Tell me why you tell me why to alter the truth, and I spend 3 days explaining with you, and you disappear in front of my eyes, so that's why I remember I'm alive. You tell me why to alter the truth, and I spend 3 days explaining with you, and you disappear. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. One, two, three. Look into the eyes and show the end of the world. I would never do love, but I would call it vegan. Can't express me still, can't express me still. The absolution. Can't express me still, can't express me still. The absolution of live my life. I need to compromise my life and say that you always saw my bad side. Because can't experience myself, can't experience myself. Because can't experience myself, can't experience myself. Be absolution. It's a fresh juice, baby, it's a fresh juice, baby. That's what you are. It's a fresh juice, baby, it's a fresh juice, baby. That's what you. It's a fresh juice, baby, it's a fresh juice, baby. That's what you are. It's a fresh juice, baby, it's a fresh juice, baby. That's what you are. The absolution of life. The absolution of life. The absolution of life. The absolution of life.
Hey, hello again, guys. Thanks for your patience. I think I'm 1 minute late. I have a really good internal clock, damn. Sometimes it doesn't work, but sometimes it is just right on and tells me where I need to be and when. Right. We were going to, in the second hour, look at this, which comes from www.copfs.gov.uk. It's a PDF, so I don't have like a home page, but it's the official guidance on... I can take off my... It's muted sign now. The guidance on cases involving communication sent via social media. So what's going to be important, it was important in the Dankula case as well. There's a false narrative put out by Sargoons, because they have a vested interest in lying about his behavior, that he's being investigated for like threatening to rape an MP. That's not actually what the criminal element of this case is. They want to say he never made a threat, therefore there's no basis to investigate him. But what the law involves is posting something grossly offensive to a public communications platform, to social media, because of the impact that grossly offensive content has on people. So if he had just said in a group of friends to a bar, I wouldn't even rape Jess Phillips, that wouldn't be, that would be presumably fine. It's the fact that he used social media to communicate a grossly offensive message. So it's his misuse of social media that really would be coming under scrutiny here. All right, so this reads, after the introduction, I'm going to skip down, because I've read through it a little bit and I've picked out the highlights. We don't have to do the whole thing. This guidance covers offenses that are most likely to be committed by the sending of communications via social media by reason of the nature of the content of the communication. Where social media is simply used as the vehicle to facilitate some other substantive offense, prosecutors should refer to guidance for the substantive offense in question. So this is like, if you're communicating child pornography, and one of the things you consider is how they use this, like, do the substantial offense, don't do this offense, right? Which is what exactly they go on to say. You shouldn't use this law to get people who distribute bad images of children using social media. You should use the child pornography laws, right? So that's just some guidance. Social media is an umbrella term that incorporates the use of or interaction with various devices, websites, applications, and online tools by the users in order to generate and share content either in words or pictures with others. So clearly both Carl's Twitter account and his YouTube account fall under social media. This policy extends to the resending or, for example, liking or retweeting of communications originally posted by others. Communications includes comment, pictures, or photographs, videos, and sound files. Sorry about that, guys. Now, this is, and I should say, this is related to the Scottish guidance, but I don't think that the English law guidance would be that far off. So again, I'm not saying that I'm an attorney, and I'm not giving legal advice. I'm merely a person who can read English, who's, made an effort to be fairly, self-educated on this, and we're just going to use some common sense. So this should not be considered legal advice in any way or a legal assessment. We're just reading through the principles. General principles. A robust approach is and will continue to be taken in Scotland to communications posted via social media if they are criminal in content in the same way as such communications uttered or published in the non-virtual world would be handled. As with any other offense, prosecution may only investigate criminal proceedings where there is sufficient, credible, and reliable evidence, and it is in the public interest to do so. Details of the public interest considerations that prosecutors must take into account in reaching the decision can be found in the prosecution code. These considerations apply equally to communications made via social media. However, COPFS recognizes that there are some particular considerations that apply in relation to communications sent by social media. So now they're going to talk a little bit more about like the technical nature of it and how it works. They're also in this document, the first thing that they really start to do in the body of it is recognized both nationally and internationally that freedom of speech and freedom of expression applies to any medium of communication, including the internet and social media. The European Convention on Human Rights and the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union state that all people are guaranteed the right to freedom of expression. These include the freedom to hold opinions and to receive and impart information and ideas without interference by public authority. And then they go on to actually quote it. So one of they started off by saying, look, we're going to talk about sorry guys, the application of the law in these cases, but remember, our first principle is to freedom of expression. We need to protect that first. That is our first order of business. So despite the cries of, the Sargoons that this is a malicious prosecution or they're trying to restrict his free expression, these guidelines are actually written first to say we need to protect freedom of expression first. So, as they go on to say here, generally, a high threshold is set before communications will fall foul of the criminal law, and general satirical comments, offensive humor, or provocative statements which might be distasteful or painful to some will not reach that high threshold. This is not a subjective thing, like, ooh, everyone has a different idea of what offensive is. That's not what this is about. They're actually looking to protect kinds of offensive speech as long as they don't fall foul of what they lay out as a criminality. I'm going to clear my throat, so I'm going to mute myself for just a second. All right. However, the ubiquitous nature of online speech and the perception by some that it can provide a cloak of anonymity can allow such communications to quickly cross the boundary into inappropriate, indecent, and criminal. Individuals cannot be allowed to believe it is acceptable to peddle hatred or to make anonymous threats of violence and harm from their computers. Such online discourse or dialogue crosses the limits of conventional discourse and may amount to a criminal offense. So they're saying, look, we understand that people are going to have some bants, but there is a point where hiding behind a computer can embolden you to do things that you wouldn't do in person. And those emboldened actions might have real-world consequences that hurt people, and those are the ones that we are looking at and will evaluate and decide to prosecute. So again, not a subjective, random notion of what is considered grossly offensive that is, just people can make up. Right. So in terms of the prosecutors, what would the prosecutor use to decide whether he or she should go forward with the case? So first, they should make an initial assessment of the content of the communication and the conduct. So both what you said and what you did, in order to distinguish between these categories of types of different types of ways that people could use the internet in foul ways or potentially criminal ways. One, communications which specifically target an individual or group of individuals in particular communications which are considered to be hate crimes, domestic abuse, or stalking. This was the specifically targeted individual or group of individuals that Dankula was convicted under. And the group of individuals he was targeting was, of course, the Jewish community. And in Carl's case, he is definitely specifically targeting an individual. He keeps bringing her up again and again. So we know that his communications are specifically targeting an individual, and as we'll see, it does reach the level, I think it reaches the level of stalking that they describe a little bit underneath this. 2, communications which may constitute threats of violence to the person, incite public disorder, or constitute threats to damage property. I don't know if they could convict necessarily on more than one if they have to. If the first one obviously seems to me sufficient to bring a case. But in terms of incite public disorder, we can see how, Carl's fans have a pattern. Now, of course, it might not to do with the case in particular, but his video where he calls on his fans to not contact journalists to tell them they wouldn't even rape them. This is sort of a public disorder. He's having an impact, so he knows that his fans do this. And then the other ones don't really, number 3, I should say, this is the distinguishing categories again. Communications which may amount to a breach of court order or contravene legislation making it a criminal offense to release or publish information relating to proceedings. I don't think that has anything to do with Carl. Communications which do not fall into categories 1, 2, or 3 above, but are nonetheless considered to be grossly offensive, indecent, or obscene, or involve the communication of false information about an individual or group of individuals, which results in adverse consequences for that individual or group of individuals. And again, we're talking here about, consequences. It's not just what's been said, but adverse consequences, incite public disorder, publishing information contrary to proceedings. Again, incite, what was the first one? Considered to be, stalking or domestic abuse or a hate crime. So if they fall into categories 1, 2, and 3, if the type of behavior and the communications being evaluated fall into those categories, there is a strong presumption in favor of prosecution action in court where a sufficiency of evidence exists because the public safety considerations involved. Clearly, Jess Phillips has had public safety considerations due to the actions of Carl Benjamin. Going back from the first rape tweet that he sent all the way to his most recent video. So, his audience has a cause and effect relationship that she can establish empirically. We're not going to look at 4. And then they talk about the categories of offense. We're going to kind of come down here. I think the only thing I wanted to look at, if they had a definition of, they do have a definition of stalking at some point. Oh, we're on page 4 here. Okay, so the above list, in terms of all the contraventions, is not an exhaustive list, and prosecutors should consider the guidance available for each of these and any other relevant offenses in establishing whether the conduct complains or amounts of, or the conduct complained of amounts to criminal conduct and which is the most relevant offense in any particular circumstances. There is a strong presumption that it is in the public interest to instigate court proceedings where there is a sufficiency of evidence to do so, particularly in relation to all cases motivated by prejudice or hate, where there has been a course of conduct which amounts to stalking or harassment, where the conduct is indicative of domestic abuse, or where public order offenses arise, and all such cases should be prosecuted robustly. Well, we can see that Carl is motivated by hate and prejudice because he's given several interviews attesting to his motivation to offend her, to be so offensive to Jess Phillips that she would have to notice him. He's also, of course, engaged in a kind of stalking behavior online by repeatedly bringing her up, and where public order offenses arise. If it's, they can track down the people who harassed Jess on the streets asking about Carl Benjamin, again, they can link it to him. I really think this is not looking good for him. I think this looks really bad for Carl personally. Now, oh yes, stalking, because this is interesting in terms of how they're defining stalking, because I do think that this qualifies in terms of the kinds of behavior that Carl is engaged with regards to Jess. Stalking. The definition of conduct amounting to stalking provided for in Section 39 of the Criminal Justice and Licensing Scotland Act of 2010 includes contacting or attempting to contact a person by means and therefore includes communication by social media. Sending a tweet repeatedly or talking about somebody in a tweet repeatedly can be considered stalking. So, sorry, that was my commentary going on. Although there must be conduct on at least 2 occasions for stalking to be established, the conduct may include a range of unwanted behavior toward an individual, and prosecutors should be aware. Therefore, a communication sent via social media may just be one manifestation of this contact. So we had the original "I wouldn't even rape you" tweet, which was one element. And then he's got some other videos about Jess as well, but obviously the one where he muses about whether I might rape her under enough pressure would be a second act. So we definitely have met the criteria of stalking, I think. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but based on what I can read with just my eyes and knowing the English language and what the criteria are, Carl has met the criteria for stalking, and stalking was one of those things that, there is a strong presumption that it is in the public interest to instigate court proceedings where there is a sufficiency of evidence to do so, particularly in relation to cases where there has been a course of conduct which amounts to stalking or harassment. Additionally, I think there's further public interest burden being put on the prosecutors based on the West Midlands police investigation, because he is running for office. He is not just a private citizen. And so I think that actually still says it's streaming. Am I still streaming? All right, we reconnected. F. Hold on, let me check and see if the stream ended, because I've got it on my thingy here. Yeah, seems like there's still people watching. No! Dang it. Okay, I'm back again. Madeline, you're saying. RIP stream. Oh, okay. You're saying now we're back. Alright, that's weird because it's saying stream offline on YouTube. I've never had that happen before. I'm here? Alright. Thanks. That was kind of weird. I can't actually see the stream yet. We're back! Alright, you just hang around long enough, it fixes itself. Just don't hit any buttons. Or not notice. That also works. You're still offline? Tell you what, guys. Since I'm... Okay. Now people... Alright. I can't quite tell people this is going to be a stupid part of the stream. Just skip ahead if you're still watching this. Because I'm noticing on mine, it can't... I can't bring it up either. So what I'll do is still offline. Okay. I'll start a new stream. Oh, I hit the live button. I think it was coming back on. Okay. I can't tell now. So what I don't want to do is... Alright, I'm getting some fine here. I think people might need to refresh. If it's offline, press... Yeah, so refresh everyone, and then I'll continue. Refresh. Try hitting the live button. Alright, as long as you guys can see me and hear me, everyone else will figure it out, I guess, from reading the chat. Or they won't. I have no idea how YouTube is going to handle this. This might be the lost stream. Like, this might not get picked up from this point forward. Oh, no, there I am. I see me. I see me on social media. That's weird. All right. So we were talking about the fact that Carl, as a public figure, is going around as a candidate for office talking about raping a person who is also an elected official. And that, I think, also increases the public interest in holding him to account for his behavior during an election campaign. Right. So I would say the stalking would be the criteria if I had to choose. You know, I'm not, I think maybe hate crime would be harder because it's one individual, and I think hate crimes are easier to prove against, you know, like having a bias against a group. So in this case, it's his repeated contact or attempts to demean Jess Phillips. So then we get down to the different types, and we can evidential test. Prosecutors should consider the guidance available for each of the offenses listed in order to establish whether the conduct complained of amounts to a crime and which is the most relevant offense. So you don't have to do everything, you just do the most relevant one. There is a high threshold test at this stage, according to the instruction to prosecutors. There are particular factors prosecutors must consider in deciding whether the behavior amounts to a criminal act. It is not the role of prosecutors to restrict freedom of expression, and as a public authority, COPFS cannot breach the rights of the human rights conventions. So again, they're talking about, we're not trying to blanket end something because someone else finds it offensive. There is a threshold of behavior or consequence to using social media in particular that is being criminalized here. So again, if this was just down the pub and he was saying these things to his mates in Gibraltar, that's not going to be prosecuted by the authorities. When you put it up on your YouTube channel and it gets so many thousands of views and people contact Jess Phillips as a consequence of your content, and you know that and you don't take it down, that's when it becomes a problem. So they go through the Human Rights Convention notes again and then saying, accordingly, there is a high threshold test to be met before such communications will amount to criminal conduct. In deciding whether such a communication is lawful, the context will be important. It is not sufficient for a communication to simply be offensive to constitute a criminal offense. Section 127 requires that the communication be grossly offensive. Factors to be taken into account in meeting the evidential test are, right? So then they have some context for the communications here. A prosecutor should have regard to the fact that the context in which interactions happen is, quite different from other types of communications. And so here are what they say. Here's the things that you should consider when deciding whether or not it actually rises to the level of criminal. They write, banter, jokes, and offensive comments are commonplace and often spontaneous. Communications that are intended for a few may in fact be accessed by millions, and such exposure increases the likelihood for someone to be offended. As it is relevant for prosecutors to consider the way in which the communications was made, the intended audience, or the application of use of any privacy settings. So what they're saying here is sometimes you're just chatting with your mates and something goes viral, something you never intended to get out into the world, that you only intended for a certain number of people to communicate because they know you and you know them and they know you'll take what you mean by it and that you are being ironic or whatever else. Versus someone who just dumps things in their social media to get attention and likes and shares. These are very different motivations, and the prosecutors need to take these into account. So while some individuals may have a reasonable expectation of privacy on social networks, without the application of privacy settings, those who post comments, videos, and pictures cannot claim to have had a reasonable expectation of privacy over the contents of their post. And many privacy settings do not, in fact, curtail the reach of communications made. However, the intention of those who post communications will be a relevant consideration. Some individuals may genuinely not have intended that the communication reach such a wide audience, and may, for instance, have just sent it to a close group of friends, and either through inadvertence or because the original post had been resent, retweeted, it had in fact reached a wider audience and caused upset or a great upset or offense. All facts and circumstances will require to be weighed by prosecutors in deciding whether the conduct amounts to a criminal offense and who may be responsible in any particular case. Investigators should ensure that they include all relevant information into any reports submitted regarding the extent of the audience reached. So these are the factors. How wide was the audience reached by the communication? The nature and accessibility of the social media site. So in other words, was this a private conversation on a Facebook group that someone forwarded, or was this posted to your YouTube channel? And the application of any privacy settings, as these will always be relevant considerations in assessing whether a crime has been committed and what offense would apply in the circumstance. So if you put it on restricted, age restricted, or you made it unlisted and you only gave the link to certain people kind of thing, those would all be taken into consideration, that you've made some sort of effort to limit the audience, or your intended audience was never meant to be as wide. Right? So, but in Carl's case, he out of nowhere, according to, from Jess's perspective, she was going about her life, and then suddenly there's this tweet that lands in her life. I wouldn't even rape you, Jess Phillips. Now, of course, to Carl and the Sargoons, there's a whole backstory. There's a whole context. There's in November of the year before, she said something that made Carl mad, and then Carl decided to use rape to demonstrate what? I don't quite know. But anyway, he clearly intended it for a large audience, because he put it up on his Twitter thing. But for her, she was just going about her life, and all of a sudden this shitlord just crashed into it, and he justified his behavior in May based on a comment she'd said the year before. It was ridiculous. But anyway, let's continue on with the guidance to prosecution. Sargoons. Yeah, they are Sargoons. Prosecutors should only consider action in this category of cases where they are satisfied there is sufficient evidence that the communication goes beyond. Right? So it has to go beyond just being offensive, shocking, or disturbing. It has to go beyond being satirical, iconoclastic, or rude. It has to go beyond being the expression of an unpopular or unfashionable opinion, even if distasteful to some or painful to those subjected to it, or if it's part of a communication that forms part of a democratic debate. So again, had Carl sort of had a restricted group and he had been making these comments in his group, that would have kind of been one thing, because even if his fans took stuff and posted it on Twitter, he could make the argument that I had never intended these communications or this description or this accusation or this comment, I wouldn't even rape you, to go beyond my users. He would have there would be a harder case to be made. But I think we can see it because I've got it up on Twitter. We're going to go through this and we're going to watch a video where Carl describes his intention behind his comments. So I wanted to do this because it's very important. We're going to go through the real thorough guidelines, the legal definitions, the hurdles, the priorities, the criteria, and then we're going to look at what Carl actually said and see if he's giving in incriminating information when he gives these interviews. In some instances, the context in which the comments were made will weigh in favor of prosecution being so satisfied. For instance, where the comments are made following a particular incident, national tragedy, or catastrophic event. Such instances will most likely be readily apparent to prosecutors. However, it may be that the particular instructions are issued to prosecutors in response to such incidents where the situation demands. So I guess this would be people who might make really disgusting, comments after a national tragedy in order to be provocative. Where the prosecutors are satisfied that the evidential test has been met, they should then go on to consider whether the action is required in the public interest. So just because you've been a dick on social media doesn't mean you're going to get prosecuted. There has to be enough of a threshold to actually move it into a category of the public interest. And in the Dankula case, I think the public interest was the fact that people in the Jewish community felt upset and menaced by it and the content of it, because it was calling for their genocide. And it doesn't produce, it's not in the public interest for people to have to live with calls for their execution and extermination as a joke mate. And in this case, Jess Phillips clearly, when it comes to the public interest, there's a lot of public interest, I would argue, in terms of how candidates behave and our public discourse. And when Carl crossed the threshold into being a candidate, he is now putting himself under greater scrutiny. And that also includes, it's in the public interest to hold those who run for office accountable for what they say during their campaign time, because we don't want a public discourse where women politicians can be put in their place by having rape hurled at them apropos of nothing, just because the man wants to remind a woman she's rapeable in his view. So what are the prosecutorial considerations in deciding, even if there's enough evidence, when would you actually take something to court? In assessing whether a prosecution is in the public interest, a prosecutor must consider the principles set out in the prosecution code, which will include careful consideration of the effect of the communication on any victim. So in this case, when it comes to consideration, Jess Phillips' experience as a consequence of Carl Benjamin's social media communications will be one of the primary factors in considering whether or not this is in the public interest. I don't think Carl's got a really good case. I think his defense attorney, I think, should be worried. I would be if I were getting paid to be his, because there's such an easy way to link his comments and her social media activity. And I'm sure in the case of a lawsuit, if she wanted a private prosecution, or if this goes through the Crown prosecution or whatever else, it would be easy for her to get from Twitter. Just endless examples of people that she's blocked, but who have been who have been saying horrible things about her, but she just can't see it because she's blocked them. So prosecutors must consider each case on its own facts and circumstances. However, some factors which may weigh against prosecutorial action being both necessary and appropriate are, if the subject has expressed genuine remorse, and particularly where this has been done spontaneously and expeditiously. Someone goes, "Oh my god, I had no idea this video was going to go viral, and I'm getting all this stuff and people are being harassed. I'm so sorry. I've taken the video down. I've eliminated it. I put a restriction on it, whatever." If you do that, you're not going to go to jail. They will take that into consideration. You done effed up, but you also known you effed up. So you kind of try to fix it. That would say, look, there's really not a case for prosecution here, because it would just be prosecuting them for something they already realized was a mistake. So being an unrepentant ass is a good... if you're going to be an unrepentant ass, as Carl has been, and doubled down on everything, then you are more likely to have a case go forward because you are unrepentant. And another thing that could reduce the likelihood of your being Prosecuted is swift and effective action was taken by the suspect to remove the communication in question, to have it removed by others, or to otherwise to block access to it. And as we know, Carl didn't take his tweet down. Twitter didn't have, his first, I wouldn't even rape you tweet down. And it was only taken down because he got his account busted, and his account was shut down. That's the only reason it only exists in photos. Carl never showed remorse for that. And likewise with his video about I might rape her, well, I might change my mind with enough pressure and even rape her. That was only taken down, I think, because YouTube complained about it. It had been up for 3 or 4 days at the time, and if you look at his social blade, he lost like 100,000 views on one day, and earlier this month. I think that 100,000 views was when he lost the video. So if we can infer that, that was, and it's not a perfect inference, we'd have to check from YouTube, but if on that one day where he, instead of his views going up, he lost 100,000, which is time to when that video was initially taken down, it had reached 100,000 people at that point. So he made no effort to take it down. Now, this is not an exhaustive list, and it may be that both of these factors would be required along with others before the scales would be tipped against prosecutorial action. Whether there is clear evidence of an intention to cause... Oh, this is important. This is important, people. Yeah, you're right, Ga 5524, Carl's going down. When you read through this, it becomes like, I feel like I should do dun-dun-dun to People's Court, dun-dun-dun, and Judge Judy or whatever. I feel like I should make a case and present the evidence because it's so easy to actually show all of the ways in which Carl would definitely be eligible for prosecution. Right. Continuing on. Where there is clear evidence of an intention to cause distress or anxiety, prosecutors should carefully weigh the effect on any victim identified. Where there has been repetition in the offending behavior, then this will be a factor to be weighed by prosecutors in favor of some form of prosecutorial action. He admits his intention was to cause distress, and there has been repetition in the behavior and in terms of the content he produces. So both of those would weigh in favor of prosecutorial action. Going on, the full range of prosecutorial disposals is available, and the prosecutor must take an outcome-focused approach in determining the appropriate level of action in line with the case marking guidelines. So now we're going to skip the young people because Carl's a grown-up, and we won't look at that. Is that it? I thought there was, I'm missing some stuff. Oh no, I guess that was it. All right. Wow, that went faster than I thought. So, yeah, when you look at it and you understand what their criteria are, and if anyone, again, wants to check it out, I'll go to the top of the page here so you can see the title and know what to look for. And again, it's a PDF. But the penalties for violation of this act, do we know? No, that's not covered in this because this is guidance on whether or not to prosecute or on what basis to prosecute. But the actual statute itself, I would imagine, puts out the framework for punishments. But reading through it, I mean, Carl ticks all the boxes in terms of his callousness, his repeated behavior, qualifying for stalking, knowingly causing distress to the victim, not being repentant, not to make any effort to take down the content. So now that you guys have read that, and I think that when it comes to drawing a line between speech that is offensive but doesn't have a deleterious effect on somebody that's measurable in their lives, like you say an offensive comment on the internet to your friends, but you're not tagging the person in and like publishing it with your YouTube channel. But in this case, Carl posted his video to a channel he knows has almost 1 million subs. He knew the impact of making those comments, and in fact, as we'll see, it was his intention to make those comments. All right, I see anti-social media is being snarky on Twitter, so that's nice. I'm going to look here. I've got it pinned, and we looked at this, I think, in the happy hour yesterday. But let's have another look at it, because now that we've read all the guidelines, so we know what a person should say or what a person would be like if they were not going to be prosecuted. It mostly has to do with, I didn't intend for this to be so public. I didn't intend for this to have a negative effect on someone. I never, I tried to remedy the issue as soon as I saw it, and and I'm really sorry. So compared to those, let's have a listen to what Carl actually said. And this to me is just I said it. It's self-incrimination. Right? And I can't see your comments, guys, but having gone through all that, and you know all the points now, just listen for the legal weaknesses in everything he's saying in this. This was done last week with Laura Chen. Oh, you can't hear that yet because I muted the desktop audio because there were two sound files coming in when I was playing the music before. So let's try this again.
And I was demonstrating to her with this tweet.
Holy, that's way too loud for you guys. Sorry, guys. Didn't do a sound check of that. So I'm going to take that way down. I really apologize. Sorry. It was like, oh, clipping. All right.
That even if I say categorically I won't do something.
Okay. I think I know where I need to put the sound meter now to make it not too soft and not... to make it baby bear. Make it just right. That, I think, is about correct. All right. Here we go.
And I was demonstrating to her with this tweet that even if I say categorically I won't do something, it will be lied about and interpreted as if it's a threat to do the thing. So the very opposite of the statement. And I had to make it offensive so that they'd listen. And they proved me right over and over and over.
Mm-hmm. And so for anyone who, again, isn't caught up with this, I think what you said was, I wouldn't even rape you or something to that effect. Something that makes it, I think, very clear that there would be no rape. So it's not so much a rape joke as a would not rape joke.
Sorry to cut in again. I don't mean to be rude. The reason that it's phrased the way it is to specifically be offensive. You know, you can't.
I mean, come on, you guys. He's just admitted that his intention was to be so offensive that they would have to notice him. That's not unintentional. That's not, just saying something on social media to your mates. That is deliberately crafting a statement about rape that's designed to offend a woman who is a survivor of a sexual assault. That, to me, goes into the criminal publication. It was designed to demean her, and he used the power of his Twitter following and his channel in combination to target her with his social media communications. And it wasn't just that he was saying this, he was using his Twitter account to say this, and he's still using his YouTube account to say this. He's using the power of his 1 million subs and trying to demean this woman by publishing content that he designs to be offensive.
I can't say that's not offensive. It probably is going to be an offensive thing to say, but it's certainly not a threat.
But that's not the legal criteria. And this is it. Carl thinks as long as he doesn't say he would rape her, that's somehow not criminal. And that was where he made his big legal error. Saying something provocatively offensive in order to get attention, knowingly, deliberately, and putting it on your social media in order to have that reach as far as possible, is a violation of the law as far as I can see. I just don't see any other way you get around that conclusion. But he's got more that's self-incriminating, so let's listen to it.
But I think it's perceived as being offensive because you're implying that someone is unrapeable, as in like unattractive.
Yeah, it's essentially calling her ugly.
Yeah, which is why it's offensive for sure.
Yeah. So he admits that it's not this. He was calling her ugly. It wasn't satire. There was no political satire there. There was no joke. It had nothing to do with men's issues. He admitted that he called her too ugly to rape. And he had crafted that statement of her being too ugly to rape in order to be as offensive as possible so that he would get noticed. And he used his social media platforms to get that attention. I just don't see why they would not prosecute him, especially since, again, he's now he's a candidate for public office. And that party association now give him, even a wider national platform from which he makes these comments that are targeted at Jess and harassing. There was no reason for him to actually, bring Jess Phillips back into it when discussing his comments, but an entire media focus, and this wouldn't count. In his interviews, he's used, sorry, I don't need my headphones anymore. He's tried to justify his behavior of calling her too ugly to rape by saying, she said something I didn't like in the past. well, what does rape have to do with men's suicides? But anyway, he said that in the media. That's in his interviews. So he's escalating there, but that wouldn't be a crime because he's not using his social media to get that message out there. He's just using the media waiting for them to be quoted. It's that moment when he puts it on his own channel for his own viewers, and he has control over it, and he understands the scope of his audience, how many people he's reaching, and he's deliberately crafting things in order to be demeaning, and he's doing it repeatedly at the same person. I don't know how that's not going to be seen as worthy of public prosecution. I just don't. It seems super, super obvious to me. So, by the way, I'm going to transition now because we're kind of done with that part of it. But yeah, why don't I have a look at what you guys have to say in the comments? You won't. I can see your comments, but you can't see your comments because I have got the wrong screen on. And I just thought you guys might want to look at cute dogs while we wrap up here. So that was pretty much what I had planned. That's an hour and 40 minutes, you guys, plus a 10-minute break. That's fair considering. So if you guys have things that you want to say in the chat, now would be the time to start typing away. Robot Christy. Is my sound robot-y? Is that any better? Okay. I'm always super sensitive to audio input center. I wonder what that was. Anyway. Well, that's muted now, so it should just be the snowball mic. Hello. Let's see. What do you guys, Mithril? No, the laws were introduced fairly recently, I think, but not as a direct answer to Carl. So I can tell you a little bit. The Communications Act of 2000 and what did we say it was? It's gone now, but 2007, 2010 was an extension of criminalization of activity on the phone that was passed by the Thatcher government in the 1980s, 1984, I think. So the initial attempt to regulate obscene behavior using social media communications was done in the Thatcher era. And then in 2007, I think it was, there was a revision of it to include social media, and it was also drafted as broadly as the other one was in terms of allowing for obscene kinds of behavior that crosses a line into public offense to be prosecuted. So no one has the stomach for 6 hours of Prager. Absolutely not on a Saturday or Sunday. What day is it? We said it in unison here. So JD Pretty Nails, Christy Winters finally listened to Hamilton. It's amazing. My fiance is now addicted to. Welcome to Hamilton. You're just going to start doing lots of songs in your head and struggling to keep up with the hip hop. But at some point, you're just going to randomly turn to your fiance and say, I'm going to get a scholarship from King's College. I probably shouldn't brag, but dang, I amaze and astonish. The problem is I got a lot of brains but no polish. I gotta holler just to be heard with every word. I drop knowledge, I'm a diamond in the rough. A shiny piece of coal trying to reach my goal. My power of speech, unimpeachable. Only 19, but my mind is older. These New York City streets get colder. I shoulder every burden, every disadvantage. I learn to manage. I don't have a gun to brandish. I'll walk these streets famished. And it'll just go on like that. So, welcome to your Hamilton obsession. Absolutely. Thank you, HK, for my 10 pounds. I appreciate that. That'll go into the podcast fund. I'm going to try to get caught up with all of the Carl-based podcasts so you guys have that record you can listen to all the time. But yeah, congratulations, JD. Hamilton is, as I've said before, it will be remembered as the most important contribution to the musical arts genre of the early part of the 21st century. So, yeah. Someone tried to convince me that I could get done for calling myself a dickhead on Facebook. I spend less and less time on Facebook, to be honest, after all the data stuff. I just use it for the happy hour group and to DM people and occasionally to post, but I don't really even bother with Facebook anymore. I probably should do more since a lot of people still use it. In 1950, my grandmother would have been working nights at the local movie theater, not making dinner for my grandfather. Yes, and also thank you, 250, because that's another thing that we should mention. That video earlier, the dinner with my family, this is a very good point, and I'm sorry we didn't mention it at the time. We talked about class-based normativity, and in terms of what is considered, what is meant to be considered middle class, or in the United States. And it was certainly the case that that video did not account for families where moms had to work, or shift work, or women working outside the home. Like, if your mom worked outside the home and wasn't there for dinner, to make dinner for you in the way that the woman in the video or the film was at the time, you might blame her and say, oh, she's a really bad mom. When the fact is that she would be providing for the family in a way that would be praised if she were the father. So, you're not missing much if you're not using Facebook, says James Russell. Yeah, I kind of get that feeling. I get tagged into stuff if it's important, and I keep up with the happy hour, and that's most important. If you like yellow, forgot you might like Mando Dio. Oh, I don't know who that is, says Cecil. Mithril says, this is the closest to social media I come to, and I hate Facebook and Twitter. Fair enough. All right. Okay, guys, I think there's really nothing. I didn't say anything apparently ridiculous that you feel I need to reply to or anything, but I hope you now feel more confident in, if you want to, dealing with trolls on Twitter in terms of refuting the idea that grossly offensive is purely subjective, that there can be no standard for grossly offensive when it comes to criminal prosecutions in the United Kingdom, that there's this notion of grossly offensive could be applied to horror movies or other content that other people don't like. You can definitely point now to this PDF, or just, whatever you want to do to quote it, to say, no, there's a pretty big threshold, there's criteria that has to be met, and even if you meet the evidentiary thresholds for prosecution, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be prosecuted. There's also a public interest component. And in the case where Jess Phillips has suffered now for 4 years, occasional eruptions of these rape-based harassment, brigading trolls in her life, because Carl Benjamin decided to target her. That's why she's experiencing this. And her suffering, I think, what she's had to endure, the threats, and I hope she's kept all of those communications and have given them over to the police. He should be held accountable because he willingly, engaged with it, perpetuated it, defended it, doubled down on it, and is still doing it. Clearly he won't learn from seeing the consequences when and this is maybe another reason in the interest of the public, in the public interest. If you guys have watched the happy hour, the whole 3 hours of it, one of the scenes was of Carl telling a woman who was reporting that Jess Phillips had been approached by 2 men. Well, it was 1 man, but I also saw reporting that it was 2 men. They wanted to take a picture of her with her with a sign that said "sore loser," so they could post it on social media. He said she lies. He's not going to stop talking about whether or not he'll rape her unless he's convicted and there's a restraining order put on him to stop talking about Jess Phillips, because he can't be trusted to moderate his own behavior on social media. So I know that people in my poll have been pretty cynical about whether or not the police will actually follow through with this criminal prosecution. I think Kevin's right that the more times this shows up in the press, the more headlines, the more editorials that come out, the more that people are made aware of him, and the police in the Midlands realize that their reactions to him and letting him continue on with this behavior with no consequence, with no accountability whatsoever, might get really bad public feedback. So who's saying please stop? I don't know what you mean. Anyway, so I think there's a really good case that he is going to at least have charges brought in a trial. I personally think that there's enough evidence. So Jenga Puppy, yes, Jenga Puppy is awesome. And also, you probably have noticed, I added some new video because I didn't want to just be the same one. So this video is new of the kitty being trying to play with the big, is that a Labrador? I don't know big dogs as well as I know small dogs, but that's also really adorable. So I found you all some new animal videos to help balance out all the nonsense in the world. And this dog with his ears. Whoop. Very funny. All right, guys. 49 hour and 50 minutes. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I have no idea what next week is going to bring, other than I'm planning on being here for you guys next Sunday. So I guess until next time, you guys, go watch the happy hour on Kevin's channel. It was a lot of fun. It's going to take you a while because it's a golden retriever. Thank you, Cecil. Go watch the happy hour. Have a fun time with that. Also tonight, Let Them Eat Kek. There's a special Brexit party edition on Kevin's channel. go check that out. I'm sure it'll be Mike and Cog and Kev again. And until the next happy hour or next Sunday, guys, I've been Christy. You've been awesome, and thanks for your time and attention. Appreciate it, and I'll see you guys the next time I see you. Okay. Gonna hit stop streaming now.